Happy Thursday, everyone. Super excited to be here. Thank you for tuning in. I wanted to give a shout out to the person who got me to start all of this. It's his birthday today. His name is Noah. He runs a detailing shop in Milpitas. And if you guys are ever in the Bay Area and you need car detailing, please go hit him up. All right. Today, I'm going to be talking about the perfect exit and about how to power through the finish of your stroke. Our mission in starting kind of these talks is to help develop community focused paddlers and leaders, and to also provide mindset, technique, and coaching talks to support you with your goals. So, paddlers and coaches alike. On today's agenda, we'll be looking at exit position fundamentals. We'll be looking at common exit mistakes. We'll talk about how to maintain power through the finish, how to add in the hip drive at the exit, look at it through 3 levels of fixes for the exits, and then some drills to improve the exit. Okay, so those we're going to be covering a lot today. I'm going to go fast. You can always go back to look at the video to kind of catch part that you missed. Okay, so let's talk about the exit position fundamentals. Here's a photo of me kind of pushing out on the exit. Different people and different coaches will have different kind of philosophies on the exit. So I'm gonna preface this with make sure you're doing what your coaches tell you to do. All right, it's not worth being different on the dragonboat or on the outrigger on the OC6. You want to all do the same thing together. Okay, and so but this is what I talk about and look at when I look at exit position. In terms of fundamentals, I'm looking at the hip position at the exit. Okay, so that's kind of right around this back part of the hip. I call it the back pocket. I call it crushing the triangle. I have a bunch of analogies for it, but the goal is that you have it engaged. And engaged means that you push out and you extend that outside leg as you finish the stroke to push the hips through. The way to think about it is like a deadlift. When you finish the deadlift or a squat, when you finish the deadlift and you come up, you want to push your hips through. When you push the hips through, that is when you're engaged with the hips. And so when you finish the stroke, it's the same thing. You want to keep the hip engaged all the way through the finish of the stroke versus if you're disengaged where kind of lackluster finish the stroke, it won't be as powerful. Shoulder alignment is very important as well when you finish the stroke. You don't want it to be hunched over. You want it to be tall. So this is not a great example, right? I'm a slightly hunched forward, and that's something that I need to work on. I get really into it, and then I kind of start hunching in. You want to make sure your shoulders are straight and tall, and that will actually carry more weight through the finish of the stroke. In terms of spine alignment, you want to make sure it's straight, okay? Some people arch their back, and that wouldn't be as strong. And some people sometimes, when they're arching their back, power would leak out from the top of the shoulder or top of the back, as opposed to sitting tall and finishing the stroke with power. Arm positions are also very important. Take a look here that my top hand is straight out. My bottom hand finished the stroke and is exiting. Many times people finish their stroke and they pull their top hand towards them. And I call that crushing the beach ball. You don't want to crush the beach ball. Take a look here, right? Here, I'm keeping that top arm away from my body as I go across from me. That is how you continue to use your lats to finish that stroke as opposed to pulling with your hands. And the analogy that I use is you don't want to bicep pull the water. You want to deadlift the water because you probably have a stronger deadlift because you're using bigger muscles with the deadlift versus bicep curl, which is just your arm muscles, which are going to tire out really quickly. And so there's also some common posture mistakes at the exit. And I talked about it earlier where your back is hunched. If your back is hunched, you're not going to be finishing with power. You'll be leaking some of the power out of your back. And the other common mistake at the exit is that people sit way too far back. And what happens if you sit way too far back is that if you lean too far back, you end up having to use your core to bring yourself back forward. So now if you repeat that 200 times, 200 strokes, you're going to be giving yourself an extra core workout that isn't going to help with moving the boat forward. It's extra. You want to use your core in front of you, and when you're doing the rotation, that's when you want to use your core, not just to sit too far back, only to sit back forward. Okay, so those are the two common mistakes, and these are the exit position fundamentals that I kind of look for when I look for the exit. Here are some common exit mistakes. This is me on a V1. Okay, so some common exit mistakes are people pulling too far back. And what pulling too far back is, usually I use a inverted triangle. So think about like if you're lifting and you're doing bicep curls, you might be like right here. If you pull your hand way back where you open up a triangle behind you, that to me is too far back. Okay. And so if you pull too far back, what ends up happening is that you will end up hurting the top of your shoulder on the bottom arm. So if you sometimes feel pain there, it's possibly because you're pulling too far back with power, and then you're kind of stressing the top part of your shoulder. Okay, so that's a common exit mistake. More common though is actually an early release where people take the stroke and then as soon as they find resistance, they start exiting. And so that would be too early. You didn't maximize your pull yet. Okay, so that's a common early release mistake. Another common mistake is that some people lift up at the exit. They finish the stroke, then they bicep pull to lift up the water. They feel the resistance on the water on their paddle, but it's not actually helping the boat move forward. When I look at the exit, I actually want you to push the water down and back, not scoop up. If you scoop up, you're moving the water deep. You're moving your boat down and away, right? As opposed to pushing forward and up, okay? Another mistake that is common is shoulder shrugging. Some people finish the stroke and then they shrug their shoulder to bring the paddle up. And you don't want to do that because that's extra movement. You want to keep this very rigid, finish the stroke, and then release. You don't want to finish the stroke, shrug. You see how that's extra movement? And so if you're doing that for 200 strokes during a race, your shoulders are going to get very tired and it didn't go into helping the boat move forward. And another mistake is loss of core engagement. And what that is kind of implying with the hip before. If you finish the stroke, but you're not flexing your core and you're not using your lats to take that stroke, you're not going to be able to push off of the exit as strong as possible. So some people, when they finish their stroke, they kind of poke the water. If you poke the water with just your hands, right, you see how this is not very strong, right? You want it to be connected to your core with your rotation and drive through the exit. Okay, so with the core engagement, it forces the exit to be more powerful. And another mistake is that some people break their wrist while trying to exit. You want to make sure that your wrist is tight all the way through the stroke, finish with the hips, then you break your wrist. Some people start kind of exiting early, so it kind of goes into the early release. You want to keep everything rigid through the full stroke, activate the hips, push through, then release. Okay, so those are some of the common exit mistakes. When we look at power maintenance through the finish, the idea is you want to get in the catch with rotation, and then you want to push and accelerate faster and faster through the exit, push with the hips, and then push out with power. Okay, so I'm going to watch this time trial that I did on February 5th, and I'm going to play it in slow-mo. All right, so let's take a look. All right. So I want you to notice just the push back through the stroke. Okay. Here we go. First stroke. Okay, so here's me setting up for that first stroke, right? You see the rotation. You see the hand. I would want the hand to be tighter to the water so it's lower. Top hand is away from my head. As we take that stroke, notice that I drive my body weight forward. Top hand is pushing. Bottom hand is engaging. As I engage, I'm sitting up with my shoulder back here. I'm driving down with the top hand. Take a look at that straight top hand. I'm pulling with the bottom hand. And the goal here is to accelerate through that water and push through the exit here. Okay, so let's take a look right there. Okay, notice that it is going negative. So I've been getting a lot of question about, hey, if it goes negative, aren't we not supposed to do that? And my answer is that as long as you're still derotating through the stroke and you're trying to get forward momentum from the stroke, it is still activating power through that stroke. So here, I'm still pushing through the water and getting to my finish here with rotation. Look at the top hand pushing away. I'm still derotating. Right now, you can see the front of my chest. As I finish that stroke, I'm still pushing out. I shove with the hips and I push off of the back for the exit. Use that to launch into my next stroke. Catch in right here. Here's the berry and the patience. Take a look at the rotation for the second stroke. Push through, accelerate through, push off the back, and then keep going. Drive through. And you'll see that I enter with patience and then try to push through the back with power. And then as I push through with the power, notice that my hips, my left hip is also shoving the boat forward during those strokes. Okay. All right. So how to maintain pressure through the entire stroke? The idea is to really tell yourself, once I catch, I got to focus on derotating, sitting up, and accelerating through that stroke all the way through the exit and push out of there. Okay. You want to avoid an early power drop off. And what a drill that I have is I call it rip the water drill, where you push through the water and try to rip it. And I call it rip the water drill, but the goal isn't to rip it. But most people, when asked to put power through the entire stroke, they actually then realize, whoa, I still have a lot of power at the back end of my stroke. Usually we exit early, we pull release early, and then that's the early power drop off that you miss this whole second half of the stroke. And you want to make sure you have connection between the hip drive and the exit, right? So as you push through and derotate and you sit up, extend your hip, drive it through, connect it with the exit push, and then connect, and then go back to use it to bounce back to your catch. It's very important that you keep the core engagement the entire time. Okay, so this is where you should be getting your core workout, right? If you are sprinting often, all of it should be coming from the core and derotation as you take that stroke, not from sitting too far back and coming back forward, right? So making sure you have core engagement through every stroke, using the hips to move as you take those strokes, power out of the finish, get back to the front. Okay. And there are common power leaks to avoid, and that's with the arm positions. That's with the if you don't activate your core, right? Those are all places where you could leak power and then not be able to power through that finish. Okay. So in terms of the hip drive at the exit, it's important that you time the release. So some people, and this is why it's important to get video and then watch it in slow-mo. Sometimes some people finish the stroke with their hips, but their hands are still pushing through the paddle or pushing through the water. You want to time it so that as you take the stroke and you finish the stroke is at the exact same moment that you finish with your hips. So timing that leg drive with the hip drive with your exit is very important. If it's different, then you want to slow down or speed up certain parts of it so that it's all one-to-one. Your hand position during the release is also important, right? It should be your outside hand should be by your hip. Your top hand should be near the outside gunnel, around where your knee level is. You want to make sure that you have smooth transitions into each of your strokes. So accelerate through the stroke, use it to bounce back and catch back, get back into the catch smoothly, right? So that you don't bounce the boat too much. If you bounce the boat too much on the outrigger for time trials, that'll hurt your time. But if everyone on the dragon boat's doing that, then your dragon boat's bouncing. You want it smooth, okay? And recovery height, you want to make sure that you are recovering low to the water, right? So as you recover versus up high and back down. When you finish that stroke, you should be low to the water as you recover. Use your rotation to set back in and get into that catch. Okay. And then the speed of recovery is important as well. When people talk about like, well, when I rate up, what happens? When you rate up, the speed in the water will increase slightly, but it's actually more, usually it's the air recovery that is faster. In the water, you're still holding it the same amount of pressure, then you have to recover faster in the air, right? So pushing out on the exit and then using that to launch yourself back into the catch. So usually we talk about air time versus water time. The water time for the most part should be very solid and strong, but in the air, you can actually cut through it faster to get to your next stroke. So we call that like turnaround, like turn over your paddle quicker to kind of increase that rate. So it starts, usually you push through the air quicker. At finishes, you might do that. So those are all kind of team decisions to make. When we talk about video review for exits, okay, in terms of big general fixes, it's looking at body position. So is the person even getting in the right position? Are they maintaining power through the whole stroke? And basic timing, like are they timing their stroke right? Is their sit up at this? Are they sitting up and derotating and hip driving at a 1-to-1 ratio? Like all of those things should be in sync. And that's the timing that I'm looking for. Like if someone sits up early and then they pull, then we got to work on that. So the second smaller nuance fixes would be hand positioning. So now looking at, hey, are your hands in the right places? Wrist angles, are the wrist angles in the right places? And the exit path, like, are they coming up too high? Are they staying low? Is the top hand coming down too low? Those would be the next level fixes after the big general fixes. And then in terms of team level fixes, we're looking at, are we all exiting at the same time between the 10 rows, between the 6 row? Are we all exiting at the same time? And are we applying power at the same time? From the catch, accelerating through the same kind of motion through the exit push. Okay, so those are kind of the 3 levels that we look at. As you get more competitive, it's more on the team side. If it's kind of big general fixes, it's more for individuals first. Okay. And then exit synchronization, making sure the exits are all together. Okay. All right, here are some drills to improve the exit. We can work on an exit focused pause drill. Okay, so what that means is paddles at the exit in the water, you're paused in there, and then we say hit, then you launch and derotate to push off the exit back into your catch. All right, so different teams will have a different setup position. Some people like to go back to paddles up. Some people like to go to like mid like hands out position or middle of the stroke. It's up to you kind of where you want to get them set back up. But the goal is to use the push off, come back to kind of close to setup. Power maintenance drill is one where you set up in the catch in the front. And then when you say hit, you're going to have them accelerate through the stroke and then come back to the setup position. So it's an extended, instead of just the exit focus, they're focusing on the full stroke, maintaining power through the whole stroke. Okay. And I call that rip the water drill. It's also power maintenance drill. Then the exit to entry connection drill. This is the one where you use the exit focus drill, but when you say hit, you're going to push out of the exit and have them set back up into the catch. And the goal here is you're looking for, are they pushing out with power? And then are they getting back into the catch with rotation and hinge? Okay. The goal is to make sure they're getting back into the water where their hands are touching and the back is rotated so that they're getting into the catch position and not over rotated. Okay. And another drill is for team timing drills. So making sure you call hit drills where the team is focused on timing the entire stroke, pushing off the exit, getting back to setup, and then doing it again. And I would ask coaches to video this in slow-mo so that you can then review to see if people are actually getting it done or not. Okay. And video analysis are very important to make sure every paddler knows what they're looking for. Okay. And there are different applications, right? So there are dragon boat specific applications. There's outrigger specific application for the exit push, and then racing versus training exits as well. I think that when you're racing, it's important to have a call that reminds people to focus on the exit push. So we call something called release now, where the goal is to push off of the exit to release the boat so that it can glide. So that's the call that we have. And then also, if you're on the outrigger, OC6 or OC1, making sure you adjust for conditions. So when it's really bouncy, you still want to get an exit through the stroke, but you don't want to do an exit where then it pulls you into huli, right? So just want to make sure you're adjusting for conditions. Still, the concepts still are applicable. You just have to apply it a little differently. So versus flat water, you can kind of pull all the way to the back. When there are conditions, if the water is below your hand, sometimes you can't quite get there. So making sure you adjust for that. Okay. Cool. That ends my presentation. I want to do a pitch for the paddling school community that's online. If you join today, there's a 7-day free trial. You can win prizes, money prizes at the end of every month. You'll get weekly workouts from me and access to courses about paddling. And you can feel free to ask any questions and interact with any other paddlers that are around the world. And make sure you get in before the prices go up. That's the link. And I want to thank you all for tuning in to tonight's Tech Talk. Thank you, everybody. If that was valuable to you, please drop a comment, drop a like, or share it to a friend that you think will benefit from this. Thank you so much for tuning in.